And we're live. Hello, good morning. Hi, Mikaela.
Hello.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to this webinar from SustainLab and Mikaela Schain. It's 9 a.m. and today we're going to dive into S1, our own workforce. So my name is Stefan Heintz. I'm representing sales. And I work in SustainLab. And today we're joined here by our amazing sustainability expert, Mikaela Schain, who will run this presentation for you today. We're still waiting for people to join, but while doing so, I will go through a few housekeeping rules. So any time during this event, you are free to leave your thoughts and questions and interact with anyone who participates in this webinar in the chat tab down to the far right. At any time, if you have any questions to us who are on stage today, also feel free to leave them in the questions tab. And there we only see your questions. So don't be shy. Ask any question that you want to have answered. We will try to take them along the way or in the end on our Q&A spot. This webinar will also be available for replay afterwards, and you will get the link in the follow-up email with also the invitation for the next webinar in our series. I will come back to what that's regarding later on. So while we're waiting for the last people to join, can you please share in the chat tab for me what is your most challenging piece of CSRD in this moment? And try to make it in one sentence. Just write out what is the most challenging piece for you right now regarding CSRD. And we will try to address this during this presentation. So please feel free and just use the chat tab in the far right, bottom right, and or the questions tab if you want to do that as well. So there are some notes coming in here. So while you are typing and writing, I know some of you who are listening in today already know us at SustainLab quite well. Either you're already using our platform or we've been in contact for a while. But also, I know some of you who are totally new to us. So I'm just going to have 1 minute about us. So SustainLab is a full-service sustainability solution provider, and we support companies across the globe to accelerate change towards a more sustainable future. Our core is the platform, and which is the software for the collecting, calculating, and visualization of the sustainability data. We want to automate as many of these processes as possible so you can spend more of your time on the activities that actually drive change. So this year, we also launched the CSRD module, which turn all your data points into clear questions, streamlines assignments, and automates the whole collection process. If you want a demo of this, please connect to me or contact me after this webinar, and absolutely we will make that happen. Now I get some questions in, or the biggest pain, or where you are right now, from Niklas here. Not to overdo, and finding the appropriate level, not to overdo and not to underdo. That's a good one. And how detailed the analysis of the value chain should be. What is too far and what is too little? Almost the same, yes. We will get back to these questions later on, and I hope we will touch upon most of them during this presentation. So now I'm very excited to introduce you to today's speaker. With years of experience as a sustainability strategist and executive coach, Mikaela Schain has dedicated her career to empowering organizations to lead their sustainable transformation. She specializes in navigating legislative changes and are designing impactful CSRD processes that fostering the resilience in your business. So over to you, Mikaela Schain.
Yeah, wow, thank you so much for that amazing intro, Stefan. Felt great to hear it. And thank you already for the questions or the reflections about your challenges in the chat. I can definitely relate to all of them in the processes I'm in now and have been the last 2 years with different companies. And yeah, so just shortly, I'm a collaborative partner to SustainLab, which is amazing because they are a truly incredible team in all ways. So don't hesitate to reach out for any support there. And so the only thing you didn't mention was that I'm also a meditation teacher, which I think is a great thing in terms of the CSRD. And just reading your questions, I can tell you that being a meditation practitioner is supportive in terms of kind of diving into the full CSRD load of info and need for knowledge and processes. It's quite a lot. So, one step at a time, one moment at a time, and it's workable. And so today we're going to look into some of the disclosure requirements. We're also going to talk about how to engage essential stakeholders. And that include talking a bit about the value chain mapping. And I saw one of the questions involve that as well. And then going into the IROs, potential IROs, and specific insights on that. And I will basically look at the disclosure requirements from the perspective of the DMA, because that's where everything happens and makes sense. And also just looking into how you can use the DMA as a business value driver and link to potential risks and opportunities coming up in the process. And I also invite you to actually participate in the chat, because I'm sure there are people here who are HR people, like with most likely much more knowledge than me in just working through everything, all topics related to HR, and you've done so for many years. So my role, what I do is that I need to have knowledge about all the standards. So I'm working on pollution, biodiversity, circular economy, and this one. But the thing is that I still need to have the depth, and you all know that. So you need the depth in all the standards. And I really love this standard because it's so close to what people have been working with for such a long time. So, but I will get back to that. But it's really, it's just basically about connecting people and really inviting all the knowledge that is already there and adding some to it. I just want to start with also saying, just giving you the bigger picture. Ursula von der Leyen said that the Green Deal is Europe's man on the moon moment. And I love this so much because it's really, sometimes people forget when they're like deep down in the reporting or the DMA and the data points and the COs, they always kind of, okay, are we compliant? But just kind of lifting just having a broader view and see what the politics behind this is that we are really, it's a man on the moon moment. It's something completely transformational. We are actually taking Europe into a green and just and fair future where people are taken care of, where human rights are respected. So it's just no, and I think that's actually really incredible. And there is around 150 directives supporting this change. So the CSRD is just one part of that incredible transformation. And so what they say is that in the green transition of Europe, everyone is needed and included. And to manage this transition, we have to make sure that we also respect human rights. We have to make sure that people have the proper education to be able to create innovation that is needed for the future. We have to have a diverse workforce so we can really use the full competencies and experience of all the citizens of Europe. We need to have safe workplaces. We need to have equality as a basis for doing everything we do. And they say no person or no place left behind. That's like so in moving towards a climate neutral continent, no place or person should be left behind. So I kind of wanted to give that as a base for this webinar. And I'm just going to quickly show this because you probably already know this, but so how the reporting will evolve from being and to being. And you can take a quick look here. I won't go through it, but I just want you to know that when doing the DMA, this is really what you need to have in mind all the time. What is coming after the DMA and what is coming after, and of course for the reporting, but also when all the work starts. And then there will be completely new teams working together, a completely new push and demand for actions and change. There will be people reading your sustainability reports, new groups, and reading with new eyes and getting new kind of info. And it needs to be therefore standardized and comparable. So for investors and potential employees to be able to understand your data. And of course, today we're focusing on own workforce, but it relates to many of the standards, and that's very clear, I think, for all of you when you start doing the DMA. And obviously, it's very it kind of goes into the workers in the value chain in many areas as well, especially in the construction industry, which I'm working with a lot at the moment. And I think I don't remember where I got this quote from, but some sustainability agency, and I like it, that to think of it like an annual checkup to make sure a company's actions aren't causing any harm, and if they do, create an action plan to fix it. And it's a bit like going into the dressing room, you undress and you see the reality as it is. And that can be fun and that can be less fun, depending on the result, depending on what you see in the mirror. And that is just so true. So when I do my DMAs, that's what everyone is feeling, seeing the reality as it is. And when it comes to own workforce, I would say that in all my processes, it has been a positive outlook, less positive when it comes to other standards like pollution, water usage, because they haven't been working with that at all in the same systematic way. And I'm not going to read this. I'm just going to say that that the whole base for this is really EU's pillar of social rights, and also, of course, what lies behind is also, of course, all the different declaration and guidelines related to human rights and businesses. And national legislation is very central to this, is central to the assessment of issues relating to the company's own workforce. And in Sweden, it's really important because in Sweden, a company's own workforce is covered by extensive labor law regulations. and I see that in every DMA I do. So what happens is that the moment you leave Sweden, things change. So yeah, if you have offices in other countries, outside EU, inside EU, then it's suddenly much harder. So, but as long as you stay within Sweden, there is just so much to work with, and so much processes already in place. And so the own workforce, as you probably know, is your own employees, of course, but also contractors that the company hires to carry out work that the company's own employees would otherwise have done, and also persons employed by staffing companies. But the subcontractors will fall under S2, the workers in the value chain. And as in all standards, what's really, it's always pointing in that direction is what kind of policies, processes, and action plans do you have for managing your potential impacts, risks, and opportunities. So, and this is, I really like working with this standard, the own workforce, because I see that there are so much of this already in place. And when we work with, I always involve different levels of subsidiaries in the processes. And it's great to see, it's been a lot of learning for all the stakeholders involved to see that different subsidiaries can have incredible processes and others not. and so it's an excellent opportunity to meet in the DMA process and learn from each other and kind of aggregate it on group level, like what do we as a full company work with, and how can we really use this standard now to promote a good workplace. And so it's both about processes engaging with workers' representatives, with own workers and workers' representatives about impacts. It's about processes to remediate negative impacts and channels for workers to raise concerns, and also about taking action on potential material impacts. And approaches to mitigating risks and pursuing material opportunities related to own workforce. And of course, looking at the effectiveness of these actions. And already when I work in the DMA, during the process of doing the DMA, I encourage everyone, and I always do the same, just keeping track of all the insights coming up, even though something might not be material. I invite everyone to be very thorough in the insights and reflections coming up in the processes, so that they can immediately after the DMA transform these into actionable points. So that's really, so in the beginning people usually, we're going to look at all these, but the moment you start, it's actually, you can see that they have really created a great standard for just continue supporting the workforce in Europe's companies and other organizations. And so these targets, so the requirements consists of the management part and the targets. And we will look more into detail related to these targets on the DMA side, because that makes more sense. It sounds a bit different, but it's basically the same. So, but the targets relate to managing material impacts, advancing positive, and managing material risks and opportunities, and characteristics of the undertaking's employees, characteristics of non-employee workers. And of course, I know already many people kind of already there think it's difficult to collect the data if you have a global organization, and so already here can be a difficult starting point. But collective bargaining, coverage, and social dialogue, and I would say that as long as you stay within Swedish borders, there is just so much on place already here. But the minute you leave, I will say this again, the minute you leave Sweden, this is just so much weaker. So don't feel like, okay, well, we basically have this, because the moment we start looking into it, it's not how actually the reality is, if it's outside Sweden, and also some places within Sweden. Actually, we have many recent examples of that, which we have been following in the media. Diversity indicators, adequate wages, social protection. So I'm just going to read them through and then talk about them more when you get to the DMA. Persons with disabilities, training and skills development indicators, health and safety, work-life balance, compensation indicators, incident complaints, and severe human rights impacts and incidents. And of course, if you have been working with different workforce-related topics, like in an HR function or something similar, you have probably already a lots of experience on this area. So what you do now is just to kind of, in the DMA, so I'm sure most people here already know that, but you start with just looking at the company's impact on the workforce, and then look at and then you change your perspective and look at sustainability topics that can trigger effects on financial flows. Yeah. And I will jump right into the next part, actually. So, and that's how to engage essential stakeholders. And I think this is really important. So I think to touch in on some of your questions, how deep should we go, or how, like, yes, kind of which level should we be in, and how much depth should we have, and so when you start mapping all the relevant stakeholders and potential stakeholder perspectives, including subsidiaries, you also parallel to that map the value chain, because those two go together. And what the standard says is that you need to bring in different perspectives, like, for example, geography. And that's really important, because if you have, for example, in own workforce, if you have an office in a weaker democracy, for example, you might have completely different stakeholder perspectives around threats and potential wars, and so you really need to do that mapping. And it can also be other things related to that country that is really affecting the employees in positive, negative ways, so you need to look at the geography on that. That's really important when you map the value chain and the stakeholders. And you also need to look, of course, at the size of the stakeholder, or the stakeholder interest, or if it's a supplier, so you need to look at the size, like how many people are included, how big is the supplier, so the size really matters. And also the nature of, for example, if you're a procurement manager, the nature of the material you're buying, or the nature of the services you are doing in terms of own workforce. So you have to have these three perspectives to really kind of find the level of on the value chain, and also which stakeholders and perspectives you should include. And for the inside, these are just experiences and some recommendations I have, but for the inside out assessment, we have been doing interviews with union representatives, protection agents. It sounds a bit strange in English, but that's skyddsombud, and also some of the workshop participants that comes in later to kind of lay the foundation for workforce perspectives. And also, of course, if you're new to this field, which very few are, but if that is the case, you need to do a more thorough mapping, and you need to build also on existing stakeholder engagement. And in the workshops, we have used a very broad group. These are just some examples, of course, HR, but also workplace engineers, project or production managers that work close to all the employees, design managers, of course, and in the construction industry that's translated to projekteringsledarna. Of course, the CSOs, and then making sure that we have representatives from, it doesn't need to be all subsidiaries. So again, you need to look when you do the value chain mapping, what kind of subsidiaries do we actually need to include? Of course, you don't need to include like a very small subsidiary if it doesn't contain a very sensitive service or product in the production. If that is the case, you need to include it if it's an obvious potential IROs, impact, risk, or opportunity. So you need to kind of, it's a design project to map both the value chain and the relevant stakeholders. And we have held several. I know that some people want to, you choose different levels of depth, but we work in all the processes I've been. It's been a lot of depth, you could say, at least a 3 months process with many meetings and workshops every week, and really making sure, because these companies wanted to have the full picture so they could build on that, all the insights for the whole reporting process later on. But that's up to you really, but you need to of course find the needed depth so that it's actually showing the full assessment. And then of course, if you haven't, if you can also use service, and I only do that if I think it's really needed. And if you haven't been in stakeholder dialogues for a long time with your own workforce, that is definitely a good add-on. But it can also be other kinds of dialogues. And for the outside-in assessment, which I think is a really fun thing in all the standards, for the interviews, owners, founders, board members, for example, and then in the workshops, since it's the financial flows we're going to look at, the risks and opportunities, we need to bring in the CFOs, communication people, legal, CEOs, often have joined from different subsidiaries, owners, and a very fun role, acquisition strategist. And I really want to send out something to you, and that's for every new acquisition you do, you get that company's impacts, risks, and opportunities. And I can tell you a really nice thing that happened in one of the workshops when the CFO just kind of dove into the potential risks related to this standard, but also others. She has said that we have to update our acquisition strategy straight away, and after a week, the strategy was updated. And that's such a good example of how you can work with this in a way to drive business in a resilient way. So just immediately acting on the insights. And I see already, of course, the time is so short, so I'm going to dive into straight away to some examples from the DMAs relating to the different topics. And when it comes to these first topics, I would say that working time has been really interesting to listen to. I mean, many of these things are regulated, in relation to Swedish law and different collective bargaining, of course, and so on. So, but still, so in the beginning, usually people say that, it's really no problem with any of these things. But actually, there are so many topics coming up in the DMA. For example, something I've heard many times in the working time topic is that, we have very flexible hours and people love it, and then boom, something changes. A reorganization, people are being fired due to this, that, and the other, and suddenly they have a new structure and organization. And so what was first a freedom and a flexibility actually becomes very acute within a year, risk of burnout for many in the organization. And I think that's really interesting, you have to have such a flexible mind here. And so they were already looking at how to deal with that. But in one way, so that I've heard several talk about has been to start with a weekly engagement service where they just look at kind of, it's like a quick taking the temperature, how are we doing, and then following up that regularly and acting on it also, of course. And yeah, so another thing that is I find really interesting in terms of working time and work-life balance in the construction industry is that it's very male dominated, and what came up that organization actually hadn't really understood the full scope of was that since values around men and being with family are changing, and since they're so dominated by men, actually they had come into a situation where the men wanted to have a balanced work life, of course, wanted to pick up children and parental leave, and they wanted to come later in the morning, but this had, with the last year, created actually risks, very clear risks, because they couldn't reach the goals in the projects, and the other subsidiaries hadn't really understood the full scope of that. But one of the subsidiaries just had it in his face, the CEOs of that subsidiary. So that was so things coming together in a broad group in the workshop. I really recommend that, because it's so much learning. And it's been the same in all the DMAs, that people say wow, we have never met, not just within one organization. I never met that, workplace engineer, or that, they haven't met in this way as the standard invites you to do, or I would say demands you to do, to get all the perspectives right. So there is just so much learning that can be gained from this, and so make sure in the workshops and in the engagement processes you have to bring in as many different people as possible that are related to the standard, and then of course the health and safety is also something that can be, for some industries, maybe this is not so important, but when you start looking at look at it, for example, what I shared about different geographies. If you have a global market and you have staff in weaker democracies that becomes increasingly weak, there's just so much there that you need to look at. Do you have the policies? Do you have the action plans? What is your plan if a war starts, or because it could be maybe potentially already a hotspot for that. And so health and safety, you really need to kind of look at your global market with new eyes, of course, and in terms of the construction industry, I would say that a big problem there when it comes to reporting is that usually subsidiaries can have many different ways of reporting injuries, so that's something I really recommend to looking at that on in an early phase in the process. How do we collect the data? What quality does our data have? And do we need to make changes here too? And that's something, just always think about that. And all right, so it's actually already 33, so I'm going to hurry up a bit. So something around pay gaps. I just want to say that the equal treatment and opportunities for all subtopic is such a good opportunity for learning and taking next steps, because there are so many companies doing incredible things, but there is so much more to learn. And yes, to send out that the EU Pay Transparency Directive will fall into place 2026. And this is something they will use to really push forward the work with the gender gap that we have, and it doesn't move in the right direction in the European countries. So So this is what will take place. So you can already now start doing a really good work with salary mapping, and they will also in this directive there is something called retroactive payment as well. So you don't want to get into that place where you need to pay out retroactive payments. And and just one last thing on this one. So they're asking for diversity indicators relating to gender and age. But of course, I mean, many companies are working with other things and working with a full DABE perspective, that diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. And just adding that, of course, to your DMA is super important and relevant. And making sure that that is included, and that's a whole new, of course, opening up of new kinds of data. But it's really important that you bring it in. And these subtopics are not relevant for very many companies in Sweden if you stay within the Swedish borders, but it could be. I mean, there are many, especially related to food, I would say, in all of Europe. The food industry is very. These topics can be very relevant, and there are many potential impacts, risks, and opportunities linked to this. That has been very clear in the DMA, but also in Sweden. I mean, we all know the examples with berry pickers. I mean, it's just horrendous, the different human rights violations there, and so there are many. Just to sum this up, and since I won't be able to go through it all, I think we can send most of this out to any who is interested. But I just want to say that there are so many potential risks and opportunities, and I would like to show you some interesting data. 69% of participants in a study believe that their employer has the responsibility to reduce climate impact of own operations. And just kind of what we need to work with a lot at the moment is to really see the risk and opportunity of ESG questions and how that relates to workforce trust, purpose, and mission. I just wanted to show you these things as some last slides. An estimated 61% of employees surveyed consider, choose, leave, or avoid employers based on their values and beliefs, meaning that the organization's stance on social issues is becoming increasingly relevant. And I think that's really interesting. And 63% of employees reported that they're unable to take time off from work and disconnect, in terms of health and family and balanced work-life balance. 57.
No problem.
Yeah.
Great, Mikaela. No problem at all. Take a few minutes more. I like the ending slides with the step 1, 2, and 3 as well, so we can go over maybe for a few minutes. I think it's super important.
Yeah, that's good. So just to say quickly, 45% of surveyed organizations do not agree that their organization would be able to hire the qualified employees they need to accomplish their strategic objectives. Just before this webinar, we talked together about, we start reading now sustainability reports, and it's incredible to see how companies are actually sharing that their employees are not satisfied with their work environment. And so really something to send with you all is that this is what's going to happen. Like, if you want to keep and attract employees, you really need to act, be very thorough in your DMA, act on what's coming up, engage with relevant internal stakeholders, and take this seriously. Like, that you will see so many shifts when you start looking at sustainability reports in order to choose your next employee, your next workplace. That's a serious risk there. And so these were just some extra. But since we don't have time to go through it, I just say that we send it out to all of you so you can still have it. And what I really want to also emphasize is that please do some kind of data strategy workshops after your DMA, because you need to go in and look at the quality of your data. Many of your questions relate to depth and how what to do with the data. And I would say that once you have used your judgment to do the DMA, you really need to spend some time looking at the quality. You can't rush this through, really. So data strategy workshops are great. Do it yourself or take support from, for example, SustainLab. They offer this and they're great. But plan in the process. Just, in the timeline, put in there data strategy workshops, quality data input. And you have to use the insights. In the end of every DMA, the CEOs and the CFOs and all of the rest say, okay, wow, we have so many insights. What are we going to do with the results? Like, we have learned so much. What is the next step? And so if you're in the DMA, plan for that already, what to say to all the stakeholders in the last DMA meeting or workshop, or say it already in the beginning, like, this is what we're going to do. We're going to do these kind of strategy workshops or whatever, but we're going to use all the insights, not only the one that are material in the DMA, but actually all the insights. So please remember that, to not only use the material topics, but all the insights that are also not material, because they can be very important for how you drive the workforce topics. And so, this is a tsunami. The transformation of Europe's legislative landscape is a tsunami. So I always say that, do you want to surf or do you want to drown? And I already see some companies on the edge of drowning. So surf it and just invite your stakeholders to collaborate together. I'm already in really interesting innovation processes with a food company, where we, together with suppliers and customers, create completely new products with much lower climate emissions. So that was just, and that can be done as well within the own workforce. Just find ways of doing this, and tell your clients how you can make this transition easy. Just tell them, we will have all the data you need, and invite them to discussions. What kind of data do you need? How can we help? So make yourself a really important stakeholder for them. Yeah, just basically move beyond compliance already before you have ended the DMA. Have an idea of how you can use the insights from the CSRD process. Otherwise, it will be so costly, because it's so much time, resources, and of course, I didn't mention that, but I really recommend you to use the software, because you will go crazy. I'm sure you've already seen that. You need a software to use for your data management and reporting. And yes.
Fantastic. Thank you, Mikaela. I never heard you speak so fast. So just give it a few minutes for the Q&A, and the next slide may be there. So we got a lot of questions in the questions bar, and so I'm just going to take out a few. And now we're already hitting 9:45, so it's of course okay to leave if you have the next meeting to go to. This is recorded, and you can review the Q&A later on if you want to. But a few questions that I think is important for a lot of people to know is, what data point is the hardest for companies to capture?
Yeah. So I would say, so just to say that I'm happy to stay here 15 minutes more if people want to hang on until 9. But so I would say that that's very industry specific. So it's very important. It's been very different in the different industries I've been working with. So you need to really it's good to do a pre-evaluation in the DMA to just kind of see before you go into the details and see, okay, so these are the areas where we actually don't have so much data, and we need to take some more time for that. And then what I usually do is that I engage people in the organization to go on either a desktop research for benchmarking data in the industry, or to just look within the organization, how do we do this today? So make a pre-evaluation in the beginning of the DMA, so you can plan your work a bit, like, okay, so this area is going to take a long time because we don't really have anything here, so how should we go ahead with that? And that's also something that you will relate to when you do the data strategy workshops, but that comes in the end, like looking at the quality of the data. But in general, I think a lot of that will be solved. The answer to that you will find if you do a pre-evaluation in the DMA. So before getting into the depth, the broader perspective.
Thank you. And can you just push to the next slide, possibly?
Yes, of course.
So I got 3 questions here about time estimation and how long time does it take to do a DMA, or how long does it take for a company with less than 100 employees to do a DMA? Will you have any ballpark?
Yeah, sure. So the answer to that is, well, first of all, how far have you come already in your sustainability efforts? I mean, relating to social topics. So it could be that, for example, with the food company I've been working with a lot, we had already done like a full value chain analysis and full internal stakeholder process dialogue. So we could just kind of build on that a lot, and then the process was much quicker. But with less than 100 employees, I think, usually when it's a big company like hundreds, more than 100 and more than 750, which is like a breaking point also for phasing requirements, I would say it usually takes around 3 months actually, and that's just due to how much time they have internally to meet. Basically, because you have to do all your other tasks. But so for a bigger company, around 3 months, with maybe 1 or 2 workshops a week, and with some 1 or 2 meetings between that to follow up more in-depth questions, looking at benchmarking or data on injuries, or so you have one workshop and then you realize, oh, okay, so we don't actually have the answer to that. Well, don't even go in there. Assign someone to look into all the details, come back next workshop, and we take it from there. So it's a bit of a process where you also need to kind of design it as you go. So, but for less than 100 employees, maybe it's good for around 2 months, I would say. But it also depends on how many you have inside that will be involved.
All right, good. No, but that's a ballpark anyway. So another question here. How do you complete the DMA with the standard for S1, for example, when it's covered so many national laws? Isn't it much stricter to consider any positive impacts in this case?
Yeah, so that is a great question, because that's what's happening, in many of these, they just say that, okay, it's already covered, so, and if something is actually completely covered, they just follow this law, and it's in their collective agreements, when everything is just, it's not much better than the average, it's not worse, you're just following the laws as it is. And the collective agreements, then it won't be a material topic for you. But usually, and you don't have to spend too much time on it, but you can't be too quick, I would say, because I would say that once you go into a specific subtopic, things come up that they haven't really considered, especially when they come from different departments in the organization. So usually it's like, oh, and they come from different subsidiaries. Oh, okay, we never thought about that. So, oh, you have more injuries in relating to that or related to that area. Or so it's actually, even though it's covered by national laws, and that makes this specific standard much easier, I can tell you. Because if you work with pollution, we need to do a lot of desktop research, actually, and read a lot of environmental reports and so on. But I still see you still find a lot of negative impacts, and you also find a lot of risks and opportunities, actually, when it comes to own standards. A lot of risks related to employee retention, or just not being attractive enough, and so on.
Mm. Yes. Okay. Next slide again, please, Mikaela, as you are handling the slides. I'm going to finish this off. Mikaela, could you push to the next slide?
Yes, of course.
So I have one more question here in the question bar, and it's going to, before I'm going to answer that, I'm just going to tell everyone we have some upcoming webinars in the end of the year and in the beginning of next year. We will send out invites to all of you to come and join us again. But the final question then is, if someone wants to begin working in CSRD reporting and has only a theoretical knowledge, where should they start? Do you have any tips?
If you don't have any knowledge about the standard?
You have only theoretical knowledge. Where should you start?
Yes, if you have only, well, I mean, I think just working through the topics, I think the standard is great. I love the topics and the subtopics. They're really supporting us to create amazing workplaces that are resilient, financially resilient and flourishing. And so the only way to go from theory into practice is to dive into the subtopics. And for every subtopic that still feel theoretical, like you can't really relate it to your business, then you do some desktop research. How does other companies work with this? I do that a lot, to kind of just go, so to have like a bit of a benchmarking. How do they do? I learned so much all the time as looking at that, but the only way to get from theory into practice is to dive into the subtopics and really be transparent. And remember, you're supposed to be naked like in the dressing room. So you have to be, and I can tell you something, a risk actually. When companies realize that if we say that this topic is material, then we need to report it. And then they sometimes become a bit scared, like, oh, do we really want to report this? Is that maybe a business risk for us to even, like the company who said that actually the work environment is really bad, that my colleague shared this morning. Do we really want to share that? So, but I really encourage you to be just honest all the way through. And then, of course, how you communicate things is then you need also the skills of your communication department. But you have to be transparent of your findings. And there is, the moment you see reality as it is, that's also when you can start addressing reality as it is, and have action plans and processes for making it better. So
exactly. Great. So again, the last slide of today, please, Mikaela. And so I just want to add to that question, where to start. I would say, reach out to us or to Mikaela and get some pointer, get some ideas, to get some help on the DMA process for your sake. Maybe you don't have to do a full DMA externally. If you have some knowledge internally, we can be, a coach coaching you on how to do it the right way, but also then deep dive into software. What kind of software do you need to be able to do this process yourself? Anyway, we have passed our time with a few minutes. And thank you so much, everyone who joined us today, and especially you, Mikaela, that shared a lot of knowledge from what we're doing here. And again, thank you for this morning and have a great Wednesday. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much, everyone. Good luck with your work.